we want to get to a stage with our practice that we feel like the stuff that we're learning is incredibly practical, right? It's got to be practical, otherwise, what's the point? Doesn't matter if you have a heart full of love sitting on the meditation cushion, if the moment you encounter the world, it vanishes. Doesn't matter how long you can sit still for, if when you need that mind of love most, you don't have access to it. So we need to develop a spiritual practice that is founded in strong foundations of mindfulness, practiced in developing these states of mind like love, and then we want to see it pop out the other side in our life somehow. And so we're going to need some strategies, coping strategies, really, for the humans. And these will help supplement the way that our meditation practice also helps supplement our life. So we want to incline our mind in a certain direction. What we're doing is we're developing a kind of view. We're developing a view that is positive and useful for us. And so I just want to tell a little bit of a story before we continue our meditation practice, which is found in the suttas, and it's one of my favourite suttas, one of my favourite teachings, and it's by a monk named Sariputta. And so he was a follower of the Buddha. He was like second in charge, and he was a wise man. So he talks about, in this sutta, overcoming resentment. Overcoming resentment. So resentment's one of those things that we've got, which is different to something like anger, right? Like anger is something that is like a flash in the pan. Something happened and we get angry. Resentment is something that we've really worked hard at to keep, right? It's a grudge. It's something that we're maybe a little bit attached to. You know, you all know who you're resentful towards, right? Someone who's done something and you're still thinking about that thing, yeah? You're not going to let them get away with it. And I think this is useful for us to think about, because with things like anger, or even just like aversion could be something like bad smell. You're kind of like, oh, yuck, want to get away from that. But it's kind of a very in-the-moment kind of thing. But resentment is instructive to me because this is something that we kind of nurture and we kind of grow ourselves. And it can feel really good and powerful to us. We could start to feel very attached to it. And it's difficult for us to let it go. So I often tell this story, this sutta by the Venerable Sariputta, because I think it's very useful in helping us understand how we can apply a practical method for letting go of that resentment, for coming out of it. And so he gives a series of similes, which I'll share with you, which I think are just useful. Because similes can help us understand things on a deep level. So in this sutta, we have 3 different kinds of actions that are going to be covered. One is actions by body, actions by speech, and the third is what's called an opening of the heart, expansion of the heart, which probably means something like someone who meditates, or someone who has a placidity of heart, someone who kind of, maybe they've got good qualities in their mind. And so, they're the 3 kind of behaviours we'll be looking at very briefly. Okay, so don't get too caught up on them. And so Venerable Sariputta says there's these 5 different ways of overcoming resentment. The first is you've got someone in front of you, someone in your life who has bad behaviour by their body. This means maybe they kill or they steal. Bad behaviour. They do bad actions with their body. But they have good speech. And from time to time, they have this opening of their heart. Their mind is placid. So you see, we've got 3 things there, like 1 bad, action bad, speech good. And they, from time to time, maybe they meditate. And so that person, 1 bad quality, 2 pretty good out of 3, right? And so Sariputta says, well, in that situation, here's what you do. Imagine there's a monk, like me, who wears a robe, and our robes originally were made of patches from rags that you find on the street or on corpses. Yeah? So imagine there was a monk, says Venerable Sariputta, who was looking for some rags. And he sees a rag on the street. What does he do? He comes along and he spreads the rag with his foot and he says, this side is good, this side is dirty. What does the monk do? Takes the dirty and the clean and separates it, throws away the dirty, keeps the clean. You understand this is simile for something, right? Someone has a bad quality, put it aside, focus on the good. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. What does this do to our mind? It helps us balance out our view of that person. We have become stuck on one view of that person, which allows us to develop that resentment, that grudge. We've become stuck. Aren't you worried that this is what others are going to do to us? Don't you wish that people would judge you on more than your one bad quality? See you in context? See you as a full person? And so this is what Sariputta is aiming at here, getting us to understand that actually people are complicated, people are challenging, but they've all got some sort of good quality about them. And our job is to look for it and to see it. And if we can do that, then what we're doing is we're protecting our own mind from becoming infatuated with resentment and hate towards that person. We're protecting our own mind from those states of mind overwhelming us. Because when we've got resentment and grudge in our mind, who is suffering? Not them. They don't even know. We're the ones. We're the ones sitting there ruminating about them, hating on them, thinking about them. We're the ones suffering. And so we want to protect our mind from even those sorts of thoughts, right? And so that's what he suggests. You stretch the rag and you throw away the part that is unclean and you keep the part that's good that you can use. And in this way, you can lessen your resentment towards that person with bad bodily action. The second person that you see is someone who has bad speech, but they have good actions of body, and from time to time their mind has this placidity. In the same way, Sariputta says, you are hot and thirsty. So hot and thirsty is this simile for anger, for hate, resentment. You're hot you're thirsty, you need to cool down, right? Remember that this is the feeling of anger, that bubbling, boiling, hatred, resentment, it's all the same. We get hot, we need to cool down. And so Sariputta says this hot and thirsty person discovers a beautiful, cool pond, but it's covered in pond slime, algae. What do, right? Well, you just push the pond slime, the algae aside so you can see the clear water, and you step in, you bathe, you drink, you cool down. Simple, right? Just the same with that rag. You just look at the good qualities and you let go of the bad qualities. The third kind of person is someone who has bad bodily actions, bad actions of speech, but from time to time they've got some good qualities in their heart, some placidity, some openness. There are people like this in the world, right? Everyone has, you think most people at least, have some redeeming qualities, right? And so Sariputta says, it's like a hoof print of a cow filled with a little bit of water. And just a little puddle, right? The smallest amount of water in a hoof print. And you're hot and you're thirsty. You need to cool down, you need some water. So what do? You get down on your hands and knees, very gently, you suck that water up. This is the lengths that we should go to find goodness in others, to see their good qualities. We should get down on our hands and knees and suck up their good qualities, not because of anything to do with them, but because of how we perceive them. Do you understand? Yeah? Don't you worry that you might be perceived as like a complete waste of time by some people? Don't you wish that they would look at you with eyes of love, that they would find something good about you to appreciate? The fourth person is someone who has bad actions by body and speech and has no opening of the heart, no placidity of mind, a hopeless case. You've tried, you can't find anything redeemable in them. So what do? Do you just hate them? Do you just think, good, suffer? No, this is a change here. Change is towards compassion. You think, just as a traveller, sick, lost, in the middle of the desert, needs medicine, needs help, needs to find their way, may that person receive the help that they need. May they get the medicine that they need to be well. May they find the way. May they stop being lost. And so in this way, we protect our own mind from going towards hatred and ill will, resentment. In this way, our mind remains protected and instead has care, compassion for that being, right? And the last person that Sariputta talks about is someone with good bodily action, good speech, and who has a beautiful mind. It's quite easy to hate people who are annoying, who's got bad speech or bad bodily action. It's quite easy to hate those people, right? But it's also possible for us to develop aversion or hate or ill will towards people who are good, isn't it? Right? Especially sometimes our teachers, our loved ones. We can develop some resentment towards them. And this can be really problematic for us. And so when there's someone who has good qualities that we would ordinarily admire, but we've developed some resentment, we should imagine, says Sariputta, that we're hot and thirsty and we see this ocean pool. An ocean pool? Forest pool. A forest pool, shady and clear water, beautiful trees protecting it. And we plunge into that water and we bathe and we lie down in the shade and we stay there. We stay in the shadow of this kind of person who has good qualities, because hopefully they'll rub off onto us, right? And so these are just some strategies. It's pretty simple, right? This kind of strategy. It's like, look, get rid of the stuff that bothers you, just focus on the good. It doesn't mean that we need to go into denial and fool ourselves. It doesn't mean that we don't see problematic behaviour, such as abuse. It doesn't mean that. I'm not saying just pretend it's not there, la, la, la. We've already identified the bad behaviour. We've already seen it. And we choose to focus in this moment on their good aspects. This doesn't mean that if someone hurts another person, we don't take steps to prevent that. Or this doesn't mean that if someone is in an abusive relationship, we don't take action or protect people. It doesn't mean that. It means that in our mind, as part of this practice, in this limited scope of time, we can have compassion and care and love for even the most difficult beings. And this is challenging for us because, you know what, it's really easy to love someone when they're a good person. It's really easy to love someone when they're easy to love. It's really hard to have love for someone who is difficult to love. You know, you see this in animals, right? Like, everyone loves a good boy. You know, everyone wants to go and pat the nice dog. Everyone has love for that creature. But a dog that bites or snarls, we don't have love for them, right? And so this is about when the going gets tough, we need to respond with a mind of love. Otherwise, we might respond with a mind of hate and ill will. Does that make sense? It's difficult sometimes, right? This kind of thinking, it's like spiritual. It goes against some of the nature of the world. It goes against some of the stuff that we're taught. But I don't think that we should see this kind of thinking as existing only in a spiritual place. We also need to bring in our worldly understanding of people and humans to make sure that we don't trip up ourselves thinking that there's only spiritual solutions. So that's why I make that mention about, you know, ensuring that if someone is in an abusive relationship, or if there's an abusive teacher, or there's someone who's violent and hurting others, that we don't just spiritualize it. we need to do the practical stuff of making sure that people are safe, that we report violence and all of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, we also have this spiritual aspect that we can bring to our experiences of the world. Does that make sense? So I don't want it to be misunderstood. And sometimes, like, some of my teachers will say things like, Adolf Hitler wasn't a bad person, and that might work in a monastery environment where people understand, they have this kind of understanding of the background of what the teacher is getting at. But you bring that out into the public sphere and people are like, you know what? And so we want to make sure that we're not just spiritualizing and kind of making all these really difficult, really horrible things just disappear when we need to address them. Does that make sense?